Hi all. Today we are going to discuss about the topic 5 generations of a computer. First of all, what do you mean by generations? Generations means the evolution of the computer. Let's have a look. Actually, computer has been evolving from the earliest state to the current stage. There are a lot of transformations. First of all is hardware, second one is software, and all these areas we are having so many transformations. Let's have a look on that. Currently, now we are having so powerful machine with GPUs, graphics cards, powerful processors, RAMs, etc. But in earlier state, there was no such mechanism for that. Now we are having all this evolution because of the frequent transformation of both hardware as well as software. Let's have a look. You can see in the evolution, you can see so many transformation of hardware as well as software. On all these factors, we are increasing the performance of the computer by improving the speed as well as the processing capacity of the machine. Coming to the evolution of the computers, we are having so many parameters. Some of the parameters we are looking on it, speed of the computers. Second one is the number of instructions executed per second. We are having so many advancement in both hardware as well as software for increasing the speed as well as number of instructions per second. Let's have a look on first generation computers. Actually, the first generation computers were evolved from 1940 to 1956. As you can see, vacuum tubes were used in first generation computers. As you can see in this pic, vacuum tubes are made up of small glass tubes. This glass tubes is nearly a vacuum which can pass electricity through this vacuum. And what's the use of this vacuum tube? Actually, this is used as the core component of the first generation computers. And you can see it's taking enormous amount of, it's producing enormous amount of heat as well as it's taking enormous amount of electricity for this processing. And is relied on mainly on machine language processing. And the main problem and the main advancement in this vacuum tubes is basically used in early system in the first generation computers, and is very much expensive. And the main problem is it's consume too much amount of electricity and it's generate too much amount of heat. And the maintenance was the major problem. And due to this maintenance, is very expensive to manage this kind of systems. And the main problem was these early systems were taking entire room for its space. As you can see in this pic, it's taking too much of space for occupying the system. This is ENIAC and UNIVAC 1, the first computers in the first generation series. Is taking this entire room space for its space. So the major task of the manager is consumes too much amount of space as well as electricity. The major advantages are it's the first electronic device which hold memory to keep instructions as well as these commands. And the major disadvantages are, first I mentioned earlier, it consumes too much amount of electricity as well as it emits too much amount of heat. And you can see these vacuum tubes are made up of glass tubes which were burned continuously, which increased the maintenance cost of first generation computers. Later, when coming to the second generation computers were evolved from 1956 to 1963. The major advancement was in the hardware part. All these vacuum tubes were removed by transistors. By the evolution of the transistors, the second generation of computers were evolved. And the major advantage of using transistors were it's use little amount of electricity, but it can give more performance than vacuum tubes. Maintenance cost was comparatively less. And we use binary cryptographic machine language in this series. And the future languages such as high-level languages such as COBOL, Fortran, etc. all its earlier versions were developed at this stage, the second generation computer. In the second generation computer, we stored instructions in memory. This was the first advancement over first generation computers in second generation. And some of the advantages are its size were reduced considerably. As you can see in the peak, the earlier first generation computers were huge in size. It take entire room to keep it machineries. But now the size is comparatively less against the first generation computers. And it's very fast. Since we are using transistors, the second generation computers were very fast. And it's very much reliable against the vacuum tubes. Actually, when we are performing some task in vacuum tube machines, the first generation machines, vacuum tubes will burn up easily. and it's not reliable at that time. But when it comes to the second generation, we are using transistors, which is very reliable. And the major disadvantages are it heated quickly, and some of the maintenance problems also exist in this second generation computers. Coming to the third generation computers. Third generation computers were evolved from 1964 to 1971. Actually, in the third generation computers, all these transistors, we were using transistors in the second generation computers. Now, all these transistors were miniatured and integrated into a single IC. That is, integrated circuits were used in the third generation computers. So, what is integrated circuits? Integrated circuits are small semiconductor chips, which where all these transistor circuits are integrated. And this tremendously reduced the size of the computer, size of the third generation computers. And as you can see, is small silicon chips, semiconductor chips, which integrated all these transistor chips. And in the first generation and second generation computer, we were using some of the mechanisms like punch cards for giving and inputting data. But now, in this third generation series computers, we were using mouse pointers, keyboards, etc. to give input to the computers. And the major difference where we were integrating and we were using applications in these machines. Earlier in the first generation computers, all those machines were simple calculating machines. But coming to the third generation, it becomes user-friendly devices for running applications, third-party applications. Coming to the third generation, as you can see, this is almost similar to the current systems. Current systems means now we are having user interfaces, GUI user interfaces. User can run their own applications. Third generation computers were one of the miniature version for the current systems. And the major advantage is ICs are small in size. So the size of the current machines were decreased by using these ICs, and this improved the performance of the system. And coming to production side, the cost was reduced tremendously since it is using ICs. And the major advancement was, as I already mentioned, in the first generation computers, we were using vacuum tubes, and those machines were simply computing machines. They were compute some results and give you some output. But in the third generation computers, you can see keyboards, mouse, etc. were used. That is, these computers take input from the user and process it, and they give outputs. These are the major advancement in third generation computers. So, what we learned till now? We learned first generation computer were using vacuum tubes, second generation computer were using transistors, third generation computers, it integrated all these transistors to a single silicon semiconductor chips. That is, all these transistors, they are miniatured and integrated into a single semiconductor chip. Coming to the fourth generation computers. The fourth generation computer evolved from 1971 to present. Actually, in the fourth generation computers, we are using silicon chips. All these transistors and all these integrated circuits, ICs, were integrated into a single silicon chip, which is a semiconductor device, which is known as microprocessor. We integrated all these transistor circuits into a single chip, which is known as microprocessor. It is the Intel 400 chip, which was developed in 1971, which was the first advancement in developing microprocessor. We learned all these vacuum tubes, transistors, ICs, etc. All these integrated circuits were integrated into this single microprocessor. This was the first milestone in fourth generation computer. From the central processing unit, internal memory, input, output, etc. all these are integrated into a single microprocessor chip. That is, we are having single signal pins for all these activities. We have some integrated complex circuits in this microprocessor, but for the end user, he can easily integrate this microprocessor in his computer. And some of the major development in fourth generation computer was the GUI, user interface. In the earlier first generation computer, we were having punch cards. In the second generation computers, we were using these transistors, but we were not having any GUIs. Even though we generated this COBOL and Photon, etc., we were not having any proper GUI. After coming to the ICs also, we were dealing with the magnetic cards and etc. But coming to the fourth generation, we were having proper GUI, graphical user interface, for user to communicate with the system. This was the major advancement in fourth generation computer. Later, after the invention of microprocessor, Intel 400 chip, we were having Intel 8085, 8086, after that 8028. We are having so many series of this microprocessor development. Along with the generations of the computer, we have to learn frequently, we have to learn deeply in microprocessor area also. So microprocessor is having another area in evolvement. So as we learned earlier, we are having 4 generations till now. Up to this 4th generation, we replace all these vacuum tubes, ICs, transistors, etc. to the microprocessor level. Coming to the 5th generation of computers. 5th generation of computers means what the computer we are seeing right now. From analyzing from the first scenario, that is first generation computer, we are having so many advancement in technology, software as well as hardware. Actually, we had to analyze it one by one. In the first generation computers were a simple machine with simple calculating capacity. After that, it evolved over time. It evolved as hardware, it evolved as software, etc. Now, it's a smaller machine, cheaper machine with higher computing capacity. That is advancement happened in the evolution of computer. That is what we classified as generations of computer. Coming to the 5th generation of computers. Those are the workstation and supercomputers exist till now. We are using all these integrated circuits. We are using all these microprocessors, then GPUs, graphical processing units, RAMs, etc. We are having a complex architecture nowadays. We are having complex building capacity. We are having smaller machine with bigger processing capacity. This is what happening in the 5th generation computing and 5th generation computers. Now we are building supercomputers for analyzing data, big data. We are analyzing machine language. We are integrating machine learning in the supercomputers. All this happening in the 5th generation computers. So first of all, we had first generation computers with vacuum tubes. Then we had second generation computers with transistors. After that, all these transistors are integrated into a smaller chip, which is known as ICs, integrated circuits. After that, we integrated all these IC circuits into a smaller chip, silicon semiconductor chip, which is known as microprocessors. Later, these microprocessors were evolved over time, and we are having highly powerful execution capacity for microprocessors also. And later, in the 5th generation computers, we are using graphical processing units for graphical activities. Nowadays, graphical GPUs have more capacity, more processing capacities than these ICs. These are the major evolution happened in the generations of computer. Thank you.